The detail that gives away your weakness is almost never your pain. It is not your past. It is not even your fear. It is your lack of control over what your pain makes you reveal. That is what people notice. That is what the world reads before you say a single word. A person does not look fragile only because they suffer. They look fragile when every frustration leaks out of them, when every disappointment changes their tone, when every little rejection alters their energy, when their emotions become visible too fast, too loudly, too often. And that is the hard truth. Many people are not studying your heart with compassion. They are studying your reactions for information. They are watching to see what moves you, what breaks you, what offends you, what makes you desperate, what makes you explain yourself too much. And once that becomes visible, your weakness is no longer private. It becomes a signal. This is why so many people feel disrespected without understanding why. They think the problem is that others are cruel, cold, unfair, manipulative, or insensitive. Sometimes that is true. But many times the deeper problem is simpler and more painful. You are showing too much of what shakes you. You are letting small things expose deep instability. You are giving the world a map to your emotional pressure points. And once people know where your balance is weak, they do not need to overpower you. They only need to press the right place. That is why control matters. Not because you should become fake. Not because you should become emotionally dead. But because a life without inner discipline becomes easy to disturb, easy to read, and easy to influence. The Stoics understood something most people learn too late. The first battle is not with the world. It is with your own impulses. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself that the mind takes the shape of what it gives attention to. Epictetus taught that suffering grows when we confuse what is ours with what is not. Seneca warned again and again that an untrained mind turns every inconvenience into an injury. That is still true now. In modern life, weakness is often not exposed by a dramatic collapse. It is exposed by small daily reactions. The offended look. The rushed explanation. The need to correct every misunderstanding. The urge to prove your value immediately. The inability to stay calm when ignored. The need to respond when silence would have protected your dignity better than words ever could. And that is the detail most people miss. Weakness is rarely announced. It leaks. It slips out in impatience. It appears in over-explaining. It reveals itself in the tone of someone who needs to be understood right now. It becomes visible in the person who cannot let disrespect pass without emotional proof that it hurt. The world sees that and makes a conclusion. Not always a fair one, but a real one. They conclude that your center is outside of you. They conclude that your peace depends too much on treatment, validation, outcomes, and approval. They conclude that your emotions can be pulled by circumstances. And once that conclusion is made, your presence changes. People may still smile at you, still talk to you, still praise you. But inwardly, they stop seeing you as steady. That is why emotional control is not just a personal virtue. It is protection. It is clarity. It is power in its cleanest form. Because the moment you stop reacting to everything, everything loses some power over you. The moment you stop making your internal world public at every trigger, you become harder to manipulate. And this does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming governed. It means you no longer let a passing emotion become a public confession. You no longer let irritation write your words. You no longer let insecurity decide your timing. You no longer let hurt force you into self-betrayal. Many people think strength means intensity. It does not. Strength often looks quiet. It looks like restraint when you could have exploded. It looks like composure when you were underestimated. It looks like calm when someone expected to shake you. Real weakness is not feeling deeply. Real weakness is being unable to carry your feelings without immediately spilling them into the world. Because once you do that, you hand your peace to the moment. And the moment has no loyalty to you. Pay attention to your own life and you will see it. How often have you said too much just because you felt misunderstood? How often have you rushed to defend yourself because silence felt unbearable? How often have you felt the need to prove you were right, good, loyal, worthy, honest, necessary? That urge feels natural, but it often exposes more than it protects. It tells others exactly where your identity is still unstable. It tells them what you still need from them. And whenever you need too much from others, you begin to lose authority over yourself. This is where inner discipline begins. Not with perfection. Not with pretending nothing affects you. But with seeing clearly what leaves you emotionally uncovered. Maybe it is criticism. Maybe it is rejection. Maybe it is being ignored. Maybe it is not being chosen. Maybe it is the fear that people will misunderstand your intentions. Whatever it is, that is where your work is. Because the hidden weakness is not the event. It is your dependence on the event going your way so that you can remain okay. The Stoic mind breaks that dependence. It says, I do not control what people assume, what they say, how they behave, what they value, or what they fail to see. But I do control what I reveal through my response. And this changes everything. Because when you stop reacting immediately, you begin to see more clearly. You start noticing how many battles were never worth fighting. How many explanations were unnecessary. How many emotional leaks came from wounded pride, not wisdom. How many times you tried to control perception instead of controlling yourself. This is exhausting work, but it is clean work. It brings dignity back into your life. It teaches you that peace is not something you receive from the world after it treats you properly. Peace is something you protect by refusing to let every external movement become an internal storm. A lot of suffering comes from the fact that people do not just want to be respected. They want visible proof of respect at all times. They want reassurance. They want immediate recognition. They want the world to confirm their worth in ways that calm their private fears. But that makes the soul restless. Because now your stability depends on signals, on responses, on tone, on timing, on how people greet you, on who notices you, on who chooses you first. That is too fragile a foundation for a peaceful life. And the world can feel when someone is standing on that kind of unstable ground. So control this. Control the need to show what wounded you too quickly. Control the urge to reveal your emotional state to people who have not earned access to it. Control the habit of speaking from the center of fresh emotion. Control the reflex of proving yourself in moments when your silence would say more. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is delay expression until truth is no longer mixed with emotional hunger. Because what weakens a person is not honesty. It is honesty delivered without mastery. It is emotion expressed without order. It is pain turned into performance. If this reflection is hitting something real inside you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Sometimes one quiet truth, heard at the right time, can change the way a person carries themselves for years. You do not need to become harder in a cruel way. You do not need to become distant from your own heart. You do not need to stop caring. What you need is to stop making your inner instability so easy to detect. Your emotions are real, but they do not all deserve immediate expression. Your wounds are real, but they do not all deserve public display. Your mind becomes stronger when it learns to hold intensity without becoming possessed by it. That is the beginning of self-command. That is the beginning of dignity. That is the beginning of becoming someone whose peace is not constantly available for disruption. And the truth is, most people never reach that point. They live exposed. Exposed by pride, exposed by insecurity, exposed by the need to be seen correctly, praised quickly, understood fully. They live with their inner world hanging too close to the surface. So every opinion hits harder. Every silence means more. Every delay feels personal. Every change in treatment feels like a threat. That is not peace. That is dependence disguised as sensitivity. The moment you see this clearly, something begins to shift. You stop asking, Why did that affect me so much? And start asking, what inside me is still too easy to provoke? That question is honest. That question is powerful. That question begins the real work. Most people never lose their strength all at once. They lose it in fragments. A little more emotional exposure here. A little more need for approval there. A little more reaction, a little more explanation, a little more visible frustration. And over time, what was once a stable presence becomes a restless one. Not because life became impossible, but because the person stopped guarding the doorway of their own mind. That is where weakness enters first. Not through tragedy, but through permission. Permission for every outside thing to become an inside disturbance. This is why self-control is not a decorative quality. It is not something nice to have once your life is already calm. It is the very thing that keeps your life from becoming emotionally chaotic. Because without control, you start living at the mercy of whatever touches your ego that day. One cold reply can ruin your peace. One moment of rejection can change your whole mood. One criticism can stay in your mind for hours. One misunderstanding can pull you into endless mental arguments that never happened out loud, but still drained your energy as if they had. And the tragedy is that many people call this normal. They call it being human. They call it caring. But often it is just untrained emotional dependence. To the Stoic mind, there is a painful but freeing truth here. Not every feeling deserves trust. Just because something hurts does not mean it is important. Just because something irritates you does not mean it requires action. Just because something feels personal does not mean it truly is. A great part of wisdom is learning to separate emotional noise from meaningful signal. Because when you cannot tell the difference, you become reactive to everything. And a person who reacts to everything ends up belonging to everything except themselves. Think about how much energy is wasted trying to manage how you are perceived. Trying to correct every false impression. Trying to make sure people see your effort, your loyalty, your intention, your value. It sounds noble at first, but beneath it there is often fear. Fear of being underestimated. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being seen in a way that does not match the identity you want to protect. And that fear makes people transparent. It makes them emotionally loud even when their voice is calm. It makes them reveal their dependency through tiny details. The speed of their reply, the tension in their body, the amount they overclarify, the pressure in their language, the visible disappointment when they do not receive the response they hoped for. That is the detail to control. Not just your visible anger. Not just your tears. Control the subtle desperation to be received correctly. Because the more urgently you need that, the more fragile you become. A strong mind understands that being misunderstood is uncomfortable, but not fatal. Being overlooked is unpleasant, but not defining. Being unappreciated may wound the ego, but it does not reduce the truth of who you are. Once you truly understand that, your behavior changes. You stop chasing correction in every room. You stop trying to win back dignity through explanation. You stop turning temporary emotional discomfort into permanent self-exposure. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by things, but by the judgments they form about things. And that sentence becomes more powerful the older you get. Because you begin to see that much of what exhausted you was not the event itself, but the meaning you attached to it. Someone ignored you, and you translated it into rejection. Someone disagreed with you, and you translated it into disrespect. Someone changed toward you, and you translated it into betrayal. Maybe sometimes those meanings were accurate. But many times they were emotional assumptions, and your reaction gave them more power than they deserved. This is where discipline becomes deeply spiritual, even without sounding dramatic. It is the discipline of pausing before your emotion becomes a conclusion. The discipline of not surrendering your peace to your first interpretation. The discipline of saying to yourself, "This hurts, but I do not yet know what it means. This bothers me, but I will not hand it authority over my entire state of mind. This touched an insecurity in me, but that insecurity does not get to lead. That kind of inner speech changes a person. It creates space between the trigger and the response. And inside that space, dignity lives. Wisdom lives there too. Because weakness is often just the absence of that space. It is the collapse between feeling and action. Feeling and speaking. Feeling and proving. Feeling and reacting. The weaker the inner structure, the faster the outside world enters and takes control. The stronger the inner structure, the more slowly external things move through you. They may still touch you. They may still sting. But they do not own the whole house. Seneca understood this when he warned against rehearsing suffering in advance and multiplying pain through imagination. Modern life makes that lesson even more necessary. So many people are not broken by what happened. They are broken by what they keep replaying. By the conversations they mentally repeat. By the disrespect they relive. By the imagined opinions of others. By the silent pressure of wanting to appear strong while privately feeling unstable. And this creates a strange life, one where the body is present, but the mind is constantly negotiating with invisible threats. That is no way to live. You were not meant to spend your inner life reacting to every passing judgment, every moment of uncertainty, every shift in human behavior. You were meant to build an interior that can hold discomfort without collapsing into it. That is what composure really is. Not pretending. Not numbness. Composure is emotional honesty without emotional surrender. It is the ability to feel the movement inside you and still remain the one who decides what happens next. And that takes practice. Daily practice. Quiet practice. Uncelebrated practice. It happens when you choose not to answer immediately. When you let a message sit until your ego is no longer writing the response. When you notice the urge to explain yourself and decide to breathe instead. When you feel rejected and refuse to turn that feeling into self-abandonment. When you are tempted to seek reassurance, but first return to your own center and ask whether the reassurance is truly needed, or whether your discomfort is simply asking to be fed. Most people feed it. That is why it grows. They feed insecurity with checking. They feed anxiety with overthinking. They feed weakness with emotional display. They feed ego with constant defense. Then they wonder why they do not feel peaceful. But peace does not grow where every internal impulse is immediately obeyed. Peace grows where impulses are observed, understood, and governed. There is also a quieter truth here, one many people avoid because it hurts their pride. Some of what you call authenticity is just undisciplined exposure. Some of what you call honesty is just emotional overflow. Some of what you call being real is just a refusal to master yourself. Real maturity is not saying everything you feel the moment you feel it. Real maturity is knowing which emotions need expression, which need reflection, and which need silence until they lose the heat that would make them destructive. That kind of restraint does not make you less human. It makes you safer for yourself. It makes your words cleaner. It makes your decisions less contaminated by wounded pride. It makes your presence heavier in the best sense of the word. People begin to feel that you are not easily pulled out of yourself. That you cannot be cheaply provoked. That your calm is not weakness, but control. And that changes how life meets you. If this is speaking to something you've been trying to understand in your own life, leave a comment with one word: control. Sometimes naming the lesson helps it go deeper. And if this reflection is helping you see yourself more clearly, subscribe and leave a like so this message can reach someone else who needs this kind of clarity today. At some point, you have to decide that your inner world is too valuable to leave unguarded. Too sacred to expose carelessly. Too important to hand over to every opinion, every delay, every shift in tone, every act of indifference. Because the world will always contain provocation. There will always be people who test, dismiss, overlook, interrupt, project, misunderstand, and disappoint. That part does not end. What can end is your habit of giving each of those things access to your nervous system, your identity, and your peace. And that is where a deeper freedom begins. Not the freedom of controlling others, but the freedom of no longer being ruled by them. No longer needing every room to affirm you. No longer needing every interaction to go smoothly so you can remain steady. No longer needing people to behave correctly in order for you to feel whole. That is rare strength. Quiet strength. Invisible strength. The kind that does not need to announce itself because it can be felt in the absence of emotional leakage. When you reach that point, you stop living like someone waiting to be emotionally handled with care. You start living like someone who has learned how to carry themselves through life with order, even when life itself is not orderly. And maybe that is one of the highest forms of peace available to a human being. Not a life without irritation, but a mind that no longer turns irritation into identity. There comes a moment in a person's life when they realize the real enemy was never only the people who disrespected them, ignored them, tested them, or underestimated them. The deeper enemy was the version of themselves that kept handing those people access to their peace. That is the painful awakening. Not that the world is harsh. Not that human beings can be careless. Most people know that already. The deeper awakening is seeing how often you help the wound continue by returning to it, replaying it, reacting to it, and giving it more meaning than it deserved. And once you see that clearly, you can no longer live the same way. Because now you understand that weakness is not just what you feel. It is what you repeatedly feed. It is what you keep returning to with attention, with interpretation, with emotional loyalty. A person becomes fragile when they build their inner life around what hurt them, around who disappointed them, around what was unfair, around what should have happened but did not. That is how the mind gets trapped. Not by the event itself, but by the habit of mentally kneeling before it again and again. And if you do that long enough, the outside event ends, but the inner submission remains. This is why control is not suppression. It is liberation. It is the moment you stop allowing your mind to become a servant to every disturbance. It is the moment you finally say, just because something touched me does not mean it gets to stay inside me. Just because something shook me does not mean it deserves permanent residence in my thoughts. Just because someone exposed a sensitive place in me does not mean I must keep bleeding there in private. That is where healing begins. Not when life becomes softer, but when you become less available to inner chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself like a man trying to return home to his own mind. Again and again, he reminded himself that the soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts. That idea is simple, but it cuts deep. Because if your mind is constantly colored by resentment, by comparison, by emotional replay, by the need to be understood, by the fear of being dismissed, then eventually that becomes your atmosphere. You walk into rooms already burdened. You speak already carrying tension. You rest without truly resting, because your thoughts keep reopening what your body is trying to survive. And then you wonder why peace feels distant. Peace feels distant because the mind keeps reopening what wisdom is trying to close. That is why one of the highest forms of strength is emotional closure. The ability to let a thing end inside you, not just outside you. The ability to stop feeding what no longer deserves your life force. The ability to look at a disappointment, a rejection, a humiliation, a misunderstanding, and say, this happened, yes. It mattered, yes. It touched me, yes. But it will not define my inner climate forever. It will not become the lens through which I see everything. It will not train me into bitterness. It will not make me leak instability into every new moment. That decision is power. And many people never make it. They keep carrying one unresolved wound into every conversation. One insecurity into every relationship. One fear into every opportunity. One old humiliation into every new room. So even when nothing bad is happening, their body is still preparing for emotional impact. Their mind is still scanning for disrespect. Their spirit is still bracing for dismissal. That is an exhausting way to exist. And yet it feels normal when you have lived that way for long enough. You begin to think tension is wisdom. Hypervigilance feels like intelligence. Emotional defensiveness feels like self-protection. But often it is just old weakness wearing the clothes of maturity. Real maturity is lighter than that. Cleaner than that. It does not mean you trust everyone. It does not mean you become naive. It means you stop letting every possible threat live inside your chest. It means you stop turning awareness into anxiety. It means you stop confusing inner peace with passivity. A calm person is not blind. A calm person is trained. Trained to observe without instantly absorbing. Trained to notice without surrendering. Trained to feel without becoming ruled by feeling. That is the person you must become if you want real freedom. Not impressive on the outside. Not dramatic. Not loud with self-importance. Just inwardly governed. Steady. Less available to emotional theft. Less desperate to correct perception. Less eager to reveal pain in search of validation. More capable of carrying disappointment with order. More willing to let silence do its work. More willing to walk away from the need to explain everything. More willing to protect dignity by not forcing understanding from people who were never trying to understand in the first place. That changes your whole life. Because once you stop exposing every bruise, people lose the easy access they once had to your reactions. Once you stop arguing with every slight, not every insult can reach your center. Once you stop needing immediate emotional compensation, delay stops feeling like danger. Once you stop performing your hurt, your mind begins to heal in private, which is where the deepest healing has always happened. Quietly. Without audience. Without urgency. Without the need to make anyone feel guilty for what they failed to see in you. And this is an important truth. Not everyone needs to understand your pain for your pain to become lighter. Not everyone needs to apologize for you to move forward. Not everyone needs to finally see your value for your value to become real. Sometimes the final chain breaks when you stop waiting for the outside world to complete an inner process that was always your responsibility. That can sound severe, but it is actually merciful, because it gives your life back to you. It returns authority to the one place where real change is possible. Your own mind. Your own discipline. Your own interpretation. Your own response. If this reflection met you at the right moment, take a second to subscribe and leave a like. And if something inside you shifted while listening, write in the comments the word steady. Sometimes one word can become a private decision. The detail that gives away your weakness is the detail you fail to govern. The rushed tone. The visible desperation. The emotional overexposure. The need to prove. The need to be reassured. The inability to remain inwardly ordered when something external goes wrong. But the beautiful part is this: what can be revealed can also be transformed. Weakness is not a sentence. It is a signal. A signal that some part of you still needs training, still needs quiet, still needs truth, still needs a stronger center. And that center can be built. Built in silence. Built through restraint. Built by refusing to worship every emotion that rises in you. Built by learning that your first feeling is not always your wisest guide. Built by returning, again and again, to the small disciplines that protect a life. Pause before speaking, breathe before assuming, wait before reacting, observe before concluding, endure before complaining, and return to yourself before handing your state of mind to the world. That is how dignity is formed. Not in perfect circumstances, but in repeated self-command. Not in being untouched, but in being touched and still remaining whole. Not in controlling life, but in controlling the doorway through which life enters you. And maybe that is the wisdom most people spend years trying to find in other people, in achievements, in praise, in status, in revenge, in recognition. But it was never there. It was here, in this quieter truth, that your power grows the moment your reactions stop being available to everything around you. That your peace grows the moment you stop explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. That your strength grows the moment you stop treating every discomfort as a command. So the next time life presses on one of your weak places, do not rush to display it. Do not rush to defend it. Do not rush to prove that it hurt. Stay with yourself first. Let the feeling pass through a wiser mind before it passes through your mouth. Let the moment reveal not your instability, but your discipline. Let it meet not the old version of you, the one who leaked pain at the first sign of pressure, but the new version of you, the one who understands that not every wound must become a visible reaction. Because perhaps the true mark of strength is not that nothing can shake you. Perhaps it is that fewer things are allowed to own you. And maybe the real power in life is not found in controlling every event, every person, every outcome, or every opinion, but in learning, with patience and discipline, to control the way your soul responds to each moment. That is where clarity begins. That is where peace stops being fragile. And that is where a person finally becomes free.